What up, guys? So, I want to be a little bit more clear. I was a little bit jumpy and out of breath and scared in regards to all that I had uncovered in the simulation study that was video NFT Shoto Concrambit, right? The alternative study to ChatGPT. So, the Mechosphere is a place that is everything industrial mechanical. Right? It's all metal. That's what that is. There's no social, it's not social media in that way. It would only be social media for mechanical, right? So it's all things like wing tech for ships, like naval ships, airplanes, or it's auto shit for car stuff, Well, it's mecho, it's mech, right? And that's where we look to face the problems of the internet, and will likely the temptation at Mechosphere is going to always be Shoto Concrambit simulation, meaning the destruction of the people we keep having to fight off, who are the weak bourgeois, and the who are they? The Nazis, like the porno bay left and John Rutkowski, the Adolf Hitler of your era. They would say one of the most wicked men of all time in John Rutkowski. And I would say that whole idea and movement, so that created a large penis supremacy group, which fell in love with the ideas of Hitler. How does that not make sense? And so with gay people, like I said, and I said this sort of in a frolic, that I was scared about this, was how it was like that was a weird sect of LGBTQ that formed due to big porno that liked laughing at, they would associate with gay guys who had average sized penises, and they would punk them for it. Because that gay guy was always looking forward to smiling on a big fake one or a big real one. Like they were a plastic chemdoc group, where if you bought the implant and dress a certain way, consented to their ideas, you were in the program. But you just had to have the appendage, was plastic chemdoc. And sadly, that would bring about the nightmare that kind of crowd always existed, where they said the real man is just the dude with the big penis, like the real alpha in society, with a real one. And how Whipple von Pogris, after the removal of plastic chemdoc, would try to find itself again in natural form. But we would have to annihilate that, because that quickly turns into anti-Semitism. Because the guy who comes out always arguing that it's a penile implant scam and Xiaflex scam in the modern world, and like how even they said that probably in the mid-1910s, was they said, or the 910 teens, right? That's what some people would call that, the 910 teens, due to the cadence structure, how to say that era in society, the 1910s, simply the 1910s, because it was 1910 as the marker. So that could have existed back then, that whole idea as far as the penile implant thing. They were experimenting with that back then. And the reason why Hitler got power and put all the Jews into camps, guys, is because he might have been a botched chemcast surgery or a botched starving out project by radical parents who wanted to create Hitler Youth, meaning parents who wanted to create a guy who had a very tiny penis as being the supreme leader, like an ultra tiny stick for a penis, like the size of a marijuana joint, like your standard, like a stick almost, is who, like he was a boy with a tiny one early on, and it got so destroyed that they swapped him out with a stick or something. Like, because Hitler was a guy, he was elected because he had such a tiny penis. Because of the radical plastic porn doc agenda of their era, with new mechanical tech that was emerging in the form of airplanes, that led crazy people to the idea that was, how do we artificially make the penis bigger? right? And that was something that they joined with photo porn doc back then to try to castrate a youth. And what they got today was they're likely what they're going to have is a small, like, asshole with a tiny broken penis, like very small, saying, "Oh, he's the chosen savior of the white species, who's going to get rid of the Jews and the blacks." Right, is what they would try to say for a guy who had a really small penis, because he would be on that side of corruption. And, oh, we didn't find any quote unquote Jewish in your background. You know what I'm saying? That kid, became a Hitler, and that's who Hitler was. Because what happened was, guys, a bunch of dudes with average sized penises that were bigger than Hitler's were crying about Peyronie's starvation scare, right? Like being either funneled into prostitution, if that was back in the 1910s, or being funneled into what do you say? In today's world, the 2000s and the 2010s, the 2000 teens. That's the sadness of that fucking story, is how it became like a baby boy Reese, with the small, he had a small broken penis, and they said, "You're in charge of doing what you want with the Jews now." You know what I'm saying? I had to change your channel. Your porn chem doc thing, we weren't going to allow that to happen, right? Because we knew that Whipple Bon Pogris was saying anybody who came out calling it an implant or chemcast scam was a Jew, is what they said, right? A Jew in Fyodor. Or they said the first guy who would come out claiming they were all trying to castrate us was a Jewish guy, is what they would say. And they would say, it's time for Hitler eugenics. That's every time a guy gets marked with scarring, they don't trust him and get rid of him. Whipple Bon Pogris was a group that castrated men with average sized dong who were Jewish. And those were women who were a group only of well-endowed men, right? And the well-endowed men got there to any means, but like there was, always like an unspoken thing, because guys would admit like, oh yeah, I have a fake one. But they were okay with it because of how great the technology got. And the technology of penile implant would forever be called, what do you say? What was it? Skin layering and bleaching is what they would call penile implants. Skin layering and bleaching. To bleach it to make it seem more realistic looking. You know what I'm saying? So that's, and that group became called Skin Layering and Bleaching Whipple Bon Pogris. And that was a group that was a selective swingers club for men who had a big penis. And they wouldn't even associate, like they wouldn't even leave the door ajar for you if you had an average size penis or a smaller than average size penis. They kept those people out of that clique. But the radical Hitler eugenics turned into people blaming the Jews for that. Because it was dudes with average sized penises with scarring on them coming out saying, you guys are performing a penile implant in a Xiaflex skin. They would forever call those guys Jewish, and they would say, we need to baptize those boys with handguns, with the Nazis. The white supremacist rallies would say, get rid of the Jews for that. Even though Whipple Bon Pogris, like that crowd, they were okay with them killing and castrating Jews. And that's a crowd that was allowed today through Porno Chemdoc in the realm of the black market, was a penile implant club or big penis club. You had to measure up to be involved in the social circle at its core, like at its closest, guys. They would allow you to talk to them if you were gay, because they had to put on their LGBTQ performance. But they would treat you like a punk, because the only guy they allowed in their circle who had an average sized penis, he had to be gay, right? If he was a eunuch like Derek Chavez, who stayed more masculine and on steroids, because some of the eunuchs he had a fake jaw and he was jacked on fucking roids when he's killing people down in the street, working for Antifa, working for anti-gang member. like a radical guy who like does weird witchcraft and voodoo, who has no penis, and he'll whack a gangbanger or a porn guy or a gang member with a crambit when that dude's coming around the corner, down in like fucking downtown LA somewhere. Like that's Derek Chauvin. And so Whipple Bon Pogris didn't like him. But they found themselves at an odds with the eunuch because he was a eunuch. Like he was on that high level of penile consciousness in the trans war. And so then if you were a ladyboy eunuch, they would trust you more. So if Derek Chavez had become Caitlyn Jenner, they would have trusted him a bit more, but not as quite, because even with the fakeness within that crowd, like there was a deep love by some woman who was a natural beauty, who she believed to be a guy who didn't consent to skin layering and bleaching. Or skin taping and bleaching. Like retaping the scar with skin and then bleaching to make the penis look old and to try to make that disappear. You know what I mean? And that was the sadness of Whipple Von Pogris, is how the penile implants got so good that you wouldn't tell for quite some time, but then one day they would turn faulty when you were in bed. And in theory, like it would turn into women laying there naked getting, you know, butt fucked by a dude with a big dick, and it accidentally breaks into a shard of plastic and cuts her open and they bleed out or something like that. Or he lives, but she died. Because his penile implant turned into a spike over time and that came from meth use and even using his own fleshlight. When like there's a famous story within that line, within that archive, that is a guy who consented to using fleshlight after having been successful with women with his penile implant for so long. Like he was getting it with women for so long, and that turned into a like a nub, like a spike inside of it that got he whittled it down with a fleshlight and methamphetamine. You know what I mean? He was on that pharma, like numbing himself and performing with the fleshlight later on in his life, when like he had an attitude collapse with drugs and work, even within that sector. Like just to be in that sector, all they cared about was your penis size. But if you fell off, you fell off. Meaning they would say, like, if he's not on his yoga and tree leaf organic mushroom purpose, then he's not, and he's falling off. And, you know, he quit his job because he likes doing too much cocaine that he learned over time was cut with meth, and so he just started smoking meth because he learned eventually, like just like with beta chroma mushroom, where people said psilocybin mushroom is not even a real thing because it grows in a closet entirely. Like those aren't even real mushrooms. That's a weird candy thing that's actually some sort of LSD. You know what I mean? And people would say beta chroma was a lie. Like all the spore kit mushrooms just made us brain dead zombies, just sheep for getting fucking slaughtered. Because it was actually not what they thought it was, because it didn't cure in the sun all day, every day, and like as a natural psilocybin mushroom found by a real shaman. Instead, it was spore kit, right? And guys developed weird monkey brain from it, and they fell off and died. And so this within that is the cocaine denial portion of methamphetamine scarring in somebody's attitude and like the way in which they speak to you. If they've done a lot of cocaine, there's a chance they've hooked themselves on methamphetamine and they just don't realize it, because of like they were told that cocaine was pure when they had just even tiny trace amounts in it. They became a build-up addict, and then a major breakthrough happened in science, and they all just started using methamphetamine. Like famous porn stars who had, if you looked at interviews, you could see in their jaw and face that they had done a lot of torqued coke, like loaded coke that was shaved by meth powder for long periods of time, and they developed like a weird form of throat cancer and a weird face condition because of it. Because with methamphetamine, because for so long they did the cocaine, and they actually, because it was cut so many times, they actually were a meth addict. And when they got the news and smoked the meth guys from doing all the coke, they said, I dig the meth. Like, it's what I've been doing the entire time. Thank you, Fyodor. I'm just going to go die in Haiti narcotics now, is what they would tell me. People like Natalie and Juliana, they would say, thanks, like, I'm just going to go smoke meth and crank in the street now and be a whore and get bucked down by the eunuchs who funnel in, like Derek Chavez. Derek Chavez was a guy who with a small broken penis, while all of those women were sucking off the members of Whipplebon Pogris. There you go. Yeah, that it's a tongue twirler. But Whipplebon Pogris were the guys who were like, yeah, it's a big dick deep throat club. Like, we can't even tell anymore if you consented to skin taping and bleaching, or skin layering and bleaching, because the penile implants got so good. But then they would rapidly decline at like year 7 because of some weird random shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, but it would be often. You would see plenty of guys come out saying that was a fucking lie because they started using methamphetamine and a fleshlight. And then not only that, like, chicks were riding it thinking they could get away with it too good. Because the tech was so good, but those implants wore out, basically. Does that make sense? Like, they had the most amazing dreamy yoga sex, the hardest you could have it. Like, these women were all completely bodied out by huge cocks. And these women, like, completely fucking bodied out. Like, their vagina was so fucking bodied out from big cocks that they were riding these big fake ones, and those women's bodies actually became the fleshlight, because it was the way the bones were working together. That penile implant eventually whittled even with the natural thing. Right. And the sad thing is like, the dream that they sold you is like, can you have that kind of amazing sex in those positions? And the truth is likely, like, that was a pharmatech aid disaster the entire time. That was just like a major risk for penile injury as it is, because of what they try to put themselves through. And so why, like, penile implant or not, it would just be seen as a masquerade. Because of, I mean, like I said, skin layering and bleaching, guys. They got so good to where you couldn't tell anymore until one day it just snapped into a shard. You know what I'm saying? And women would get x-rays of men for this fucking reason, right? But that's the story, is that these women got so bodied out and they joined a club to where you could only be in that circle if the guys in that circle had a big penis. And they weren't, anytime they got hit with homophobic accusations, they said, well, what about our buddy Dwayne? Because Dwayne was a gay guy with a big dick who they allowed in the circle. They said he's allowed in that circle because he has a big dick. And that's what he's allowed to, like, but so anytime they said, and that guy wasn't fucking the chicks at all. He was just a gay guy who they let into the circle because he had a big dick. And that was a raceless effort. Like, you saw people of all races in that movement. That was the pro-AIDS movement, the pro-happy life, MDMA, video NFT Shotokan Krambit. Like, they all woke up one day and started using methamphetamine because they said, oh, we've been using that same coke for so long, and we know now that we were getting small trace of meth every single time. And when they hit the meth pipe, they said, I was doing meth the whole time. Like, because they had never hit the meth pipe, and then they just converted. And then they joined the march in the street that was Haiti narcotics, where they got bucked down horribly by a part white, half Hispanic kid named Franklin Chavoya, who was a kid who was just a real punk-ass karate group leader at one point. From 11 to 17, who got into drugs as well, and he had also penile trauma due to, like, Whipple-Von Pogris conditioning. And that's what they've been teaching us in schools. Your wives with well-endowed connect, they were teaching it to. They were just completely fucking you guys over. We're the socialite, wicked, weak bourgeois. And Mark and Elon had to survive through saying, yep, we're going Mechosphere now. And Mechosphere is an internet space. It's mainly focused on industrial metal, is what that's about. Industrial metal is the Mechosphere. That is an internet space where it's so politically correct. Like, they have an initial video NFT release, right? But they don't monetize video NFT because they don't want to contribute to a dark web economy. That's where they show Rovec, the big tractor, a big metal tractor in Rovec that they created for Earth. And then the Mechley automotive sector, right? Things like that. And other groups would join that effort of having their metal business be a social media, like a web, not just, it couldn't just be, it's not just social media. That is a whole new realm of internet. And there's no social media and there's no, how do you say? Pornography or cage fighting, because cage fighting goes to pay tour. Pornography, I don't know what you're gonna do with that, but that's not my fucking problem. But so that became a major split where they said that's just all industrial metal. Anything industrial metal is that sector of the internet, because they said, what about the fucking steel trade? We have Borka Metal interests. Like, what about the hard labor? What does that mean? And what will we prove with Maleo Torquent on Mars? At least that experiment, even on Earth soil, with really tough soil, to try to simulate what it would take to drive Maleo Torquent into Mars. And we would see we're actually really far behind when it comes to the greater scheme of things, And so that's where we would say, yeah, the twisted metal artwork of Michael Rodriguez went on to the industrial metal web browser, where you couldn't find pornography and you couldn't find cage fighting and you couldn't find social media or any movie shit. It would just become very boring, like the most boring hypnotic thing you could possibly think of in the Mechos. Like, you would, like, people in your culture club, like all you weak bourgeois, because a lot of you weak bourgeois you were just weak bourgeois, you weren't Whipple Bon Pogris. Like Adam Fugreed and Aaron, like those guys aren't, even Javi, like those guys aren't Whipple Bon Pogris. Those are weak bourgeois members where they were trapped by Whipple Bon Pogris. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of just the structure of, like, that's how the scale is, because those guys weren't, like, a lot of those guys were of organic mind who said, I don't want to get a fake dick, dog. Who kept their average one. And then they said, wait, do I have scarring? Does that mean somewhere down my family lineage I'm Jewish? Because that was the narrative of Whipple Bon Pogris. You know what I mean? So that is the Twisted Metal art show that is just Rovec mechanical. The most boring, like, think about the most boring voice. Like some guy named Larry Novotny who just drones talking about metal art, like just drones about it, and that's all it is. It's just guys who made a Rovec driller for planet Earth to do simulation, right? To do a Mars simulation, and they have a badass tractor on wheels called Rovec, T-Rovec or something like that. Tractor Rovec, Trovec even they would say. Rovec is the R-O-V-E-C, right? Tractor mechanical, Rovec tractor mechanical, where that part of the internet, the Mechosphere, is just ads for metal, right? That is the Mechosphere. There's no social media, like no TV shit, like no Comedy Central. That is to put people in their place, guys, to understand who's who. You know what I'm saying? When it comes down to the sad reality that was Whipple Bon Pogris and who controls the right to the metal, right?